Charles said we've learned a lot of lessons from what we've done so far. We want to begin to consider what those lessons are by beginning to hear about some experiences from around the world. What has been done, what's worked, what hasn't worked so well, and what conclusions do we draw from all that as we try to chart the way forward. So joining me now, we're going to have some experts from Europe, from North America, from Africa and from Asia, who are going to share their practical experiences of MSP and highlight what they see as some of the good practices and solutions. So we're going to hear about what they've done and how successful that has been. Let me bring them onto the stage, and as I do so, perhaps they could come and join me. Leo de Vries, Senior Advisor in the Ministry of Infrastructures and the Environment in the Netherlands. A very warm welcome to you, Leo. And if you take the seat one in, that would be terrific. Steve Diggin, Regional Marine Stewardship and Planning Coordinator, Coastal First Nations Great Bear Initiative in Canada. We heard about that a little bit earlier. We're going to hear a lot more about it, I hope, very soon. From Africa, Anja Kreiner, Senior Fisheries Biologist in the Ministry of Fisheries and Marine Resources in Namibia. Very warm welcome to you, Anja. From the Seychelles, Alain Ducomaramond, who is Principal Secretary in the Environment Department, Ministry of Environment, Energy and Climate Change, Republic of Seychelles. From Asia, Yungo Nam, who is Research Fellow in the Marine Policy Research Department in the Korea Maritime Institute. A very warm welcome to you. There he is. And last but not least, Wei Zhu, Professor, Deputy Director of Sea Area and Islands Office in the National Marine Functional Zoning, Expert Committee Office, National Ocean Technology Center in the State Oceanic Administration in China. A very warm welcome to all of you. The way this is going to work is vast hour panels, not to make presentations as such, but opening statements of 4 to 5 minutes each, just outlining what they have been doing in their country and some of the lessons they have drawn from that. I'm then going to ask them a few questions, and then I'll come out to all of you for some brief questions as well. And gentlemen and lady, if I could make one request in advance, please do stick to that timing so we have plenty of time for discussion, and forgive me if I signal if you are running over. But Leo, we heard from Charles earlier, Netherlands, one of the pioneers in this area. Tell us about what you've been doing.
Thank you, Jackie. Yeah, I was very glad that Charles showed also some maps, because I felt a little bit uncomfortable to talk about marine spatial planning without having a map. But thank you, Charles, for showing those. And indeed, we were in 2005 already starting with bringing into the picture what is happening at sea, because there was a tension going on. More and more activities were taking place. Before that, it was a kind of arrangements between shipping and oil and gas, and that was fine, and for the rest it was fishing areas, and everybody was happy. But when new kids on the block came, and especially on wind farms, but also sea farming, there was a need to start planning. So we first had this management plan. It was not really a spatial plan, but it was a plan for management and to bring into the picture what are the opportunities. And what happened then is that we got 75 or 78 applicants for wind farms at the North Sea. Each spot, somebody asked for a permit. So we were in stress, how to deal with this. And there was only a subsidy for 3. So we had a big problem there. In the end, we solved it by putting a lot of tension also on the initiators to bring it down to a reasonable 17 applicants. And secondly, we started making plans about the future. Where do we want, as a government, as a society, want to have developments taking place? Of course, then you have to know what is happening already and what are the plans of each of the different sectors. But that, in fact, was the first plan. And the objective for the government was indeed to find space for about 6,000 square kilometers, for 1,000 square kilometers for 6,000 megawatts. But also to secure these areas where we could explore the sand to defend our country against sea level rise. As you know, we are below sea level. We need a lot of sand to keep us dry. And we also had a thought about what do you plan? At sea, everything is short in time. The longest permissions and permits are 20 years. After that, it's sea again. So we thought we should maybe only plan the priority activities. So that's military defense areas, oil and gas, shipping lanes, renewable energy, the sand mining areas, and of course to take in consideration these marine protected areas as a condition. So that's one thing. So that gives certainty to developers where priorities are going to take place. Secondly, we had an assessment framework. If somebody else comes with a very good idea, we have an assessment framework how to decide if it can take place and where it can take place. And we also have to understand that the permit for an activity at sea is not a permit for the area. It's the permit for performing an activity at that space, at that area. If another activity can also take place there, it's fine. So we have military areas and sand mining areas in the same place, which is fine as long as they don't shoot during sand mining. So you can make arrangements about this. And then you have 4 dimensions. You also have in the depth. You can have things on the seafloor and things on the top. Of course, it is very important to have public participation in this. But although nobody lives at sea, there are people have stakes there, also from the NGOs, but also from the professionals. And in the beginning, we did not know exactly how competing activities would work together. What should be the distance between a shipping lane and a wind farm? IMO and international rules says that you need a safety zone of 500 meters, but that's for one object. If you have 10 in a row or 20 in a row, it may differ. So captains and harbor people came to us and said, 500 meters is not acceptable. We have to increase. But with how much? Who knows? Nobody knew that. So we sat together with captains from ships and we did exercises in simulators to see what would be a good distance. And we had more of these conflicts, potential conflicts, like to go with a helicopter to an oil and gas platform. You need 5 nautical miles of free horizon to fly there. 5 nautical miles, that's quite a distance, and you cannot build wind farms there. But the question is, do they always want to go there from always the same direction, or maybe they can be guided to certain directions, so you don't need a full circle? So these kind of discussions took place when we developed the second plan. And indeed, now we have the third plan just finished. It's 2016, 2021. And there we even added the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. It's not only a spatial plan, it's an integrated plan of a policy for the whole North Sea. So the ecosystem-based approach is there guaranteed by putting all the measures together for the Marine Strategy Framework Directive to get a good environmental status. There are 5 pages in this policy document on marine litter only. And that's nothing to do with space, but it's part of the policy. You also have to deal with all kinds of rules and arrangements. A little bit then to finalize on the international.
We can come back on a number of these points during the discussion, so very briefly, if you would, at this point.
So last one, that's okay. Yeah, on the international cooperation. Yes, Charles is right. We share our plans with our neighbors. We go to them and say, you know, we have a very nice draft plan. You also have a very nice draft plan. And then we take a little discussion and we go home. We promised each other the next time we will do it differently. Before we draft up the plan, we will meet and sit together and to see what are the things we are concerned with. And one of them is indeed this renewable energy, which will take place more and more in the North Sea. So I'll leave it to that.
Thank you very much. I'd like to come back on that challenge of the transboundary cross-border cooperation a little bit later on, if we can. Steve Diggin, again, Charles mentioned you as an example of, instead of the top-down approach, being built very much from the community. What has your experience been?
Hi there. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you to the organizers. And Charles, thank you for showing a map of our area as well. It's very difficult to be up here without a map to point to as a planner. But yes, as you did hear, our process is called the Marine Planning Partnership. There are 2 other processes which are closely associated with MAP, as we call it. The PIN-SEMA, the Pacific North Coast Integrated Management Area, and then an MPA process, which Charles also mentioned should be all integrated into one. But the experience that we've had is really around a failure, I think, at a national level with national legislation to develop marine spatial planning. And because of that failure, the folks that I work for, Coastal First Nations Great Bear Initiative, took up that challenge, especially after doing all the land use planning over the 10 years previous, to really get at what is it that we want to develop or not develop in the marine space within the territories of the First Nations of the area. And so it did involve very, very basic community level engagement, where we looked at what each community wanted to do, what they wanted to develop, what were their values and interests, and how to bring that to a planning process. And so over several years, with the support of foundations like the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, we developed plans for each community, and we brought that to a broader process with collaboration with the province of British Columbia. And so, unfortunately, the federal government at that point did not engage with us, and so we did not have the jurisdiction to work on fisheries or on shipping, which are falling within the federal jurisdiction. We have achieved, I think, a good set of plans. We have 4 sub-regional plans, we call them. You saw in the picture up above that Charles put up was one of the sub-regions. It was the Haida region. We have 3 other sub-regions that have been basically identified as planning units. And then we have an overarching plan that is we call it an action framework rather than a plan. And it's because it is how each of those subregions chose to work together on the activities that they could agree upon. Each of those plans within them have both aspatial and spatial components. And they do have monitoring and evaluation components built into them. What's different on the water now as opposed to as before the plans are developed? I'd say that we have a common vision with at least the provincial government and the communities, First Nations communities and non-First Nations communities in the area, on what is it that the vision should be for that area. There's clear guidance and social license. We have a zoning plan, so where activities should be developed or where they shouldn't be developed. We've got a number of areas identified for marine protection, where we would build them into the next process, which is the area planning for a network. And we are working now on marine response planning. The area was lacking significantly in marine response planning. And like I said, we're doing monitoring and evaluation. We do have a 5-year strategy that is up on the website, mapocean.org. And we have just about met our 5-year implementation budget. We are on a 5-year cycle for renewal, and we're entering into our 3rd year. So.
Thank you very much indeed. Lots to come back to in terms of the lessons learnt from your approach a bit later. But Anya Kreiner from Namibia, your experience to date and the work you're now doing in this area, please.
Namibia is only starting with the whole MSP process, and Namibia is quite unique, maybe not following directly after Canada, but definitely when we look to the next speaker, the Seychelles. We've got a coastline of about 1,500 kilometers, which on the terrestrial side is entirely protected by national parks, except for the 5 little towns that are along the coast. And Namibia's ocean space is about 2/3 of its land, of its terrestrial space. However, the economy relies heavily on the ocean, with marine diamond mining, fishing, transport, and tourism being the key sectors. We only have 2 harbors, and the one harbor in the central coast is set to expand to be one of the transport and logistics hubs of the whole southern Africa. So there are big developments happening there. And despite this vast ocean space and the low population, the pressures on the ocean by the different users are very similar to many other countries, except that by now we don't have the drive for renewable energies yet. But we will take that into account. And our government has, under its National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, decided to introduce MSP, and under that plan, the Ministry of Fisheries and Marine Resources is identified as the lead agency. We have formed a national working group only last year in August, which consists of 10 ministries, 2 universities, the 2 universities in Namibia, I must say, and the National Commission for Research, Science and Technologies as active members. The working group has held initial stakeholder engagement information sessions in December last week. We have developed and adopted a data and information strategy and a stakeholder strategy. We have further established 2 dedicated task teams, one to look at key areas of high natural values following the EPSA criteria and the CBD process as one of the sectors to inform the MSP. And the other one is looking at data and information and how to organize that part for the planning. And our next key step is to develop a current status report which should assess the status quo in the planning area, identify all human activities and issues, identify conflicts, synergies, and we, in this plan, developing this report, we also have a very active stakeholder involvement from civil society and industry and, of course, government. And our MSP process is supported by the Regional Marisma Project, which is a partnership between the Benguela Current Convention and its member states, which are Angola, South Africa, and Namibia, and the government of Germany. And the project is funded by all these parties, with a German partner being the Ministry of Environment. And it's implemented by the German Development Corporation, GIZ, in partnership with BCC and the member countries. So at this stage, it's still on the project phase.
Okay, thank you very much. So interesting, as you start on this process, I'll be interested to hear from you later to what extent you feel you can learn from those who are further down the road, or to what extent you see your challenges as unique in this area. But we'll come back to that a little bit later on. Let's move to the Seychelles now, to Alain de Commarmont. Your experience to date, and how are you confronting your challenges?
Thank you, Jackie. We started the process about 2 years ago when our former president did some deep reflection in reference to future economic development, but also the future in reference to biodiversity conservation. And he made the declaration that we wanted to protect 30% of our EEZ. Seychelles, as you know, is the smallest state in Africa. And we constantly also have the second largest EEZ in Africa. And with this challenge ahead, we embark on this exercise, like I said, 2 years ago, in partnership with different players. We use resources we had gained from the GEF for Outer Islands project, and partnered with the Nature and Conservancy group in starting the process nationally, in putting in place the structure. The main driver behind the decision, obviously, apart from our drive to have 3 times as much as per our obligation on the CBD IHE targets, which asked for 10%, we wanted to go higher, was the fact that we had to plan better in terms of our economic activities. Obviously, with such a large ocean space, you have different sectors interacting: tourism, shipping, and of course fisheries, which is one of the core activities of the island. And also in reference to other pressures, external pressures, economic pressures globally, but also, as you might have heard, in reference to security also. The region has been plagued by piracy the last 5 years. We had a quiet time for the last couple of years, but coincidentally we just saw in the news that the first, there's been an attack yesterday. So it was a cross-sectoral need for us in ensuring that we maintain the conservation of our valuable marine resources. Seychelles waters is one of the global biodiversity spots in the world, together with our pursuance towards better development of ocean space, our blue economy roadmap that we were seeking. So since then, we've been moving slowly but surely. We now have a structure in place nationally which ensures proper stakeholder involvement, both at the political level all the way down to grassroots level. And we hope that this year we'll achieve our first target, which will be 15% of the 30% area to be designated. We also started the process to looking at our management arrangement eventually, institutional arrangement, but also the policy. We'll be starting the process to start the policy formulation and eventually also the regulation that will follow with that. So that's where we are a bit in reference to our exercise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that crucial question, which both you and Anya pointed to, of this balancing act, the conservation imperative, but for both of your economies, blue growth so very, very important. And how do you manage those conflicts? Going back to where Leo started, we'll come back perhaps to some of the experiences that our panel have had so far and where we go from there. But let's turn to Asia now and to Korea first. Yung-Ho Nam, please.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to share some common concept before going to the main board. The one is there are some argument on concept. So between the several concepts suggested by the many people and many activists, many government. For example, ocean planning, ecosystem ocean management, marine spatial planning, ICM, coastal planning and management, something like that. There are so many concepts about the planning and management, but I'm not sure there's a relation between the ICM and then marine spatial planning in Korea. Actually, the marine spatial planning in Korea can be regarded as ICM, the extension of the ICM. So now I would like to go on board. The first one is I would like to share with you about the lessons from Korea. First one is now we are trying to scaling up the management regime from the ICM to MSP. That means there are two points. But one is the extension of a geographic boundary. That is the territorial sea area under the ICM to the EEZ under the MSP. So we call it now, so MSP is a little bit extension of the geographic boundary for now in Korean society. And second one is there are some issues about implementing the ICM. First one is the government's authority conflict among the ministries. Even the Korean government has the ocean governance system. There's this Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries, but there's some authority and permission system does not belong to Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries. For example, sand mining and then so energy development or the mineral resource development is they are going to other related ministries. And third one, to make a concrete spatial planning and management system, we would like to apply the ecosystem service value-based approach to marine spatial planning. So even though we have adopted coastal zoning mechanism 17 years ago, but we would like to do concrete information about that, each place, so micro scale. So we need to use more information data to make a decision at the various scale level. So the third one is our challenging is so operate the information data system. So even though our information, our survey system covers the territorial sea areas, but our coverage area does not extend to EEZ. So nowadays we have the big issue in marine spatial planning, that is the conflict between the sand mining and the fisheries. So before 20 years ago, when we give a permission to sand mining on EEZ, at that time our measurement coverage is just only limited to the territorial sea area. But nowadays, the conflict between the fisheries and sand mining. And then the last one, so methodology development. As I mentioned before, we would like to adopt the ecosystem service value-based approach. So many people say that. So when it comes to marine spatial planning, the trade-off might be core part in making a rational decision. But the core part of the trade-off is to make a value, assess the value of each habitat, each area, each species. So we need to develop some methodology just like that. So methodology set by the TEEB. There are so many different methodologies to evaluate the value of our ecosystem and their services. That is our new challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And to complete the picture, and then lots to discuss with all our panel, Wei Zhu from China, a leader in this area. You started a long time ago. Can you tell us a little about your experience?
Thank you. Thanks you and IOC invited me to share Chinese experience related to marine spatial planning. A speaker said in China, MSP is called marine function zoning. Short for MFZ. It experienced more than 30 years. Now we developed 3 generations of MFZ since 1989. The third generation MFZ is from year 2011 to 2020. It is approved in 2012. Its scope of planning covered the total area under the jurisdiction of China. After several years of implementation, some successful experience has gained. So let me introduce what we did in the third generation MFZ. First, the third generation MFZ comprises 3 levels: national, provincial, and municipal. National MFZ divided the whole sea area under China's jurisdiction into 5 seas, subdivided into 29 subsections, further subdivided into 78 functional coastlines. It established strategies of development and protection for the 5 seas, the main function of 29 subsections, and as well as basic functions and regulations of 78 functional coastlines. According to national MFZ goals, provincial MFZ set specific objectives and divided marine basic function zones. Municipal MFZ divided subclasses zones and deciding the coastline and the sea area where needed protected. Second, Chinese new generation of MFZ builds a classification system of 8 classes and 22 subclasses. The 8 classes are agriculture and fishery zones, port and navigation zones, industrial and urban construction zones, mineral and energy zones, tourism and entertainment zones, marine protected areas, special using zones, and reserved zones. The provincial MFZ divides the internal water and the territorial sea into about 2,000 function zones. Third, China new generation of MFZ set 6 goals, including marine protected areas, marine function zones of sea farm, reasonable control of scale of sea reclamation, area of reserve zones, mainland natural coastline, restoration of the coastline, which are separated and implemented in provincial and municipal level MFC. National Marine Function Ruling sets 6 quantitative objectives in total. It requires all the provinces to propose their corresponding objectives, which are up to or more rigorous than national objectives. Otherwise, their ruling may fail in the review by the China State Oceanic Administration. Fourth, China FSC technical system enforce top-down control ruling in different levels. Generally, it ensures the superior subordinate constancy in ruling by unifying organization and formulation. China State Oceanic Administration has embarked on its preparation of a new generation of marine function ruling, formulated a unified technical standard, a unified organization of formulation in cultural provinces and cities, rely on National Marine Functional Ruling Expert Committee to review and examine each provincial ruling, and submitted the provincial marine function ruling report to the China State Council for approval. That's the process of China, the third generation MFC.
Thank you very much indeed. And if I could stay with you for a moment, Wei, in terms of outlining some of the, Yung Ho outlined some of the challenges that they have faced. I wonder from your perspective, what are the biggest challenges that you have faced?
The biggest challenge is how to make ecosystem marine spatial planning. The Chinese MFC is a typical human activity MSP. It decreases the conflict of different human activity. But how make the MSP further to ecosystem, it's a big challenge.
Okay, thank you very much. And Yung Ho, you outlined a number of areas of challenge. What's the biggest one that you are facing? There are a couple more mics if we don't want to keep passing all the way down the line. But perhaps if you two could share, and then Alain, if you grab one, and Leo, if you grab one, then we sort of got one between two here. But what's the biggest of the challenges that you've faced, Yung Ho?
In Korea.
In Korea?
Yes, in Korea. So there is the realignment of authority among the related ministries as for the spatial planning.
So identifying who is responsible for what and what level, because Wei talked there about the national, the provincial and the municipal. Is it that, or is it ministries working together?
Yes, they're working together, but sometimes there might be very big, strong conflict among the ministries. For example, so as actually the Korean government has established the national plan and local plans about for managing our coastal area, that is the territorial sea area. So, but that is the there's national level planning and then provincial level planning as well. So nowadays is more conflict from the among ministries. For example, so Minister of Ocean and Fisheries has a very powerful authority to make a plan for entire national territorial sea areas. But so actually the Ministry of Oceans and the Fisheries, they have not much authority to cancel the existing plan or the ongoing plan, ongoing project initiated by the other authority, other administrators. For example, so now its biggest issue in Korea is the conflict between the sand mining and the fisheries. So the Fisheries Permission and the Fisheries Activities is the so under the so Minister of Ocean and Fisheries. But sand mining is under the Minister of Land Use and Transport, or something like that. And also renewable energy or the natural energy development is under the Ministry of the Energy and the Industry. The ministries. That's why they have the authority to make a decision. This area needed to be developed as a sand mining areas. This area needed to be allocated for the energy development. But so when it comes to authority level of the Ministry of Ocean and Fisheries, they cannot control their activities and plan before the finalizing of their activities and project.
Okay, so a very complex picture there and something that needs to be resolved. Alain, 2 years in, what are you finding so far has been the biggest challenge for you?
There's been many challenges, considering Seychelles is such a tiny country and to undertake this mammoth task, But I think for us, since we've started, there's been two. In principle, like the other colleagues has mentioned, it's getting the sectors together. Getting them together, being such a small country, is not a difficult task. But what I mean by getting them together is to get them to come together with a common purpose, to be able to agree on this collective effort, this common exercise of, in certain times, compromising, reaching certain consensus on priorities. So this was a bit of a challenge at first. It was, of course, something normal. It was something new, especially when it came to the challenge within conservation, and especially fisheries, which is a hotly contested issue in small islands.
And how have you addressed that? How have you brought them together?
Our framework, what we've come up with, instead of just coming up with something and putting it forward to the stakeholders, we've allowed them to also input into the right framework that works for them. And we don't have a static or closed structure. So we have obviously our normal structure of executive committee, which is comprised of ministers and CEOs and PSs, but also you have the steering committee. But below that, going down to the level of the Fishermen Association and scientists and so on, you have focus groups, working groups, which allows for input at that level. And one of the other aspects also which has proved to be challenging for us, obviously, is data and information, to be able to start putting together the maps and schemes, both nationally, bringing again together ownership of data nationally, but also internationally, what's out there, accessing that on a timely basis to be able to process the work,
absolutely.
to have this
Perhaps
product.
come back on that data question, because it's something that you mentioned as well, Anya, in terms of developing that data strategy. But what for you, starting out on this process now, are the biggest challenge at this early stage in development for you?
I think one big challenge is the lack of understanding of MSP and its requirements at senior level. On the technical level, it's there, but on senior level, the institutions that are involved sometimes struggle to get released to attend the meetings, funding problems, even though it's endorsed in cabinet. So we need to put a lot of effort in information sessions for senior management, especially in Namibia. As I said, not many people live at the coast, so all data infrastructures, even ministries that have some responsibility in the ocean, they can't relate really to the ocean. Yeah. There's three-dimensional space. We've got land planners, but planning ends at the coast.
And you talk about senior management. Are you also talking here about political will, political commitment? Because without that, you don't get the resource that you need, and you don't get that sort of, we talked about bottom-up, but also that top-down driver. Is it at the political level as well that it's a struggle?
We haven't reached a struggle yet. I mean, the politicians have endorsed it through the Biodiversity Action Plan. So the political will is there. It's the middle management,
is where the problem is. Maybe come back and see if there's any advice from those further down the road on that. But before we go to there, Steve, in terms of what you have managed to achieve through this community-led process, what was the hardest thing about doing it?
I would say that just to step back into where we originally came from, which was a national top-down level, we did start out with legislation that was put in place in 1996, which really didn't have that political will, that broad support at senior levels. We were delegated to the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, who does not really manage in a spatial way, so they don't really understand the process of managing in a spatial way. It means a real change to how they would look at fisheries, for instance. They weren't interested in developing planning around fisheries. When they decided to take on a different topic, like this question of scope and scale is always on the horizon for us as well, they thought they might try to tackle transportation and shipping. And of course, the Ministry of Transport didn't like that.
And how did you address that? How did you turn it round?
Well, I think we tried to take a step back and look at broader issues, realizing that transportation or fishing wasn't on the table for management. We started to look at the finer scale and started looking at community level issues, where activities were happening, where they weren't happening. And then we started to talk to stakeholders and look at where were the challenges out there. Many people came back and said, we don't understand what you're doing. What is the problem here? What are you trying to fix? And of course, in the background, the backdrop, the context of this whole process was some very controversial developments that were on the horizon to come to fruition. A pipeline from the Alberta tar sands, which would mean shipping bitumen out into the ocean. But as that process kind of flailed and changed, at the community level, when we shifted into the scale that mattered most to the people on the ground in the communities that I work with and the non-First Nations communities, people started talking about, what is it about the issues on the ground here that we can deal with?
So part of the answer to this lack of understanding, which we're hearing about a lot already, is make it relevant, and when you bring it down to the level of practicality, people perhaps begin to understand more what it is you're trying to do. Leo, from your perspective, since you began over a decade ago, what have been the main challenges? And perhaps if we can now begin also to identify, in terms of lessons learned, what do you think the key ingredient of your success so far has been?
Now, we still have challenges, but one of the major changes, I think, is that what I mentioned, that in the beginning we had all these conflicts between users, that also the users start to think across sectors. So they start to think in a more integrated manner, because just sticking to your own fixed position doesn't help. We have a shared sea, we want to develop it all together. And that now we see that it is taking place. Just recently there was an initiative from the oil and gas industry and the wind sector and nature organizations together to think how they could cooperate in making proposals and changes. So that is something which is very good, but that you have to recognize that they have a lot of knowledge. I mean, joint fact-finding, we call it like that, is very important. We don't, as an authority or as a planner or a scientific research institute, have all the knowledge. The knowledge is also with the experience. Could be from local people, fishermen, but also from the industries. So you have to acknowledge that and bring that to the table and to discuss. But on the other hand, also open up that they should think in a more integrated manner. But one of the challenges we still face is the fishermen. And the fishermen, they are more hunters than taking fish from one place to another, and that doesn't go very along with spatial planning. And these fishermen, they feel that they are frustrated in their activities because we have wind farms where they cannot do all kinds of fishing. They can only do, not doing bottom trawling. There will be MPAs where they probably will be restricted in what they can do. And in addition, we have, it's a common fishery policy within the EU, the landing directive, so they have problems there. And now, on top, the Brexit. Maybe half of the North Sea cannot be fished with Dutch fishermen. So that frustrates the process quite a lot. And we haven't solved that completely. We try now to bring them more to the table and say, how would you then see how certain developments would take place, knowing that we can't stop wind farm development. We don't want to stop wind farm development. but give more opening to them, to bring them
So
much more
until
to them.
now, they've really just seen the downsides of all of this, and they don't see the opportunities, whereas those other sectors, because I was going to ask you, you said the others are beginning to work together to develop. Have you driven that process, or has it been organic? And same question really to you all in terms of how, when you're looking for ingredients for success and reconciling those conflicts, do you have to drive it, or do you set these processes in motion and then they begin to drive themselves?
No, the latter. I mean, we stimulate, we facilitate, we challenge them. We had a conference because in fact, we start already with the third new plan because of our legislation, but okay. So we started 15th of November last year, and we brought all the important stakeholders to the table and said, okay, you can present, but you cannot present your own plan. You have to bring in the plan which you have consulted some other sectors together. So that was the idea. It didn't work completely, but it was a beginning.
So you have to force the pace a bit.
Yes.
But you do get there. Steve, in terms of those different and competing demands and interests, in terms of an ingredient for success in reconciling that and bringing people together, both for development and implementation, how have you confronted that? What do you think the key has been?
I think in our experience, and I don't know how unique we are, other than that, as First Nations, we come to the table as a government. So we are dealing with 3 levels of government: the federal government, the provincial government, and First Nations. And of course, there's a municipal level as well, but they kind of fall within the provincial level. So having clear governance structures in place, I think is really important, and that was one of the biggest challenges we had as well. And then I think having a clear scope. You know, what is the mandate that gives you the ability to take on a particular task, problem to solve? If you're going to zone a specific area, be very specific about what you're going to do.
How important are very clear targets? I mean, we heard talk earlier, and one of Charles's questions was about targets and goals for the future. EU loves targets, like setting them big headline numbers, big round numbers. Is that very important? Or you're talking here about the scope and being clear about that. What would you advise others about target setting?
Coming to the table again, as First Nations, we have targets, we have goals, but we're also a government. And so we have to engage stakeholders, we have to engage other governments and understand what their interests are and try and balance those off. The targets are the most controversial topics that we have. And when we talk about, or we're looking at now, EBM monitoring and setting indicators in place to measure the ecological system, everybody starts talking about, well, what would be, the target, what would be the threshold? And you can just see, other governments' toes curl when you start to talk about targets, because of course that means that they actually have to engage and start to make some motion. So I do think targets are important, but they also scare some of those groups off from
So
the
used
process.
with caution.
Used
Leo,
with caution.
you wanted to jump in, and then I'll come to this end of the panel.
Yeah, before jumping into targets, we did also an exercise in developing a vision, a shared vision with stakeholders. And that's maybe easier. You talk about 2050, so the long term. How should look at in 2050? What is all the objectives? And from that, we got 5 themes which are relevant to all, which is then change from oil and gas to renewable energy, building with nature, multiple functional use, have the connection still in place. So these, let's say, visionary more themes you can work on later to develop targets which
But
go
first,
to that
get the vision thing.
Get the vision.
Get the vision thing. Anya, I see you nodding about this. In terms of ingredients for success and the role of targets within all of this?
I mean, I fully agree with the vision thing, and that's what we are busy with at the moment. And we take it really from the grassroots of the working group, that we started with a simple exercise that every member had to say, how do they see the ocean? Also because, as I said, some ministries don't have a big stake in the ocean or not a very active involvement in the ocean. And that vision will also be shared with our stakeholders. But I think the visioning, we must all have a vision, and of course under that comes the goals and objectives.
And develop that vision together,
Yes,
not...
yes,
So
yes.
that is a key. If you want to succeed, everyone has to be headed in the same direction, as it were, and buy
Yes.
into it. Any other lessons in terms of the key ingredients for success? Wei, you've been doing this for a long time. Do you have any particular... If you could grab the microphone off Young Ho, thank you. Can you identify particular ingredients for success?
Yeah. I have 3 advice for success MSP. The first is legislation. The legislation law is very more important to make the MSP implement successful.
Yeah.
The second is stakeholder engagement.
Yeah.
Just now, many people mentioned the stakeholder engagement. In China, we build a high efficiency decision-making process to keep sectoral demands be considered when we prepare MSP. When we make MSP, we have 3 inquiry process. The 2 of inquiry process are for sector. The first is when at the process of data and information collection, each sector plan would be bring together to make sure the development demand of each sector would be considered in the MSP. The second, after draft the MSP, a meeting will be held, which expert and officer from different administration department would be invited to solve the disagreement. The third advice is sufficient action to ensure MSP implementation, such as established infrastructure building, observation and evaluation system, and so on.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Just in terms of those, yes, Young Ho, in terms of those ingredients for success, one thing we haven't talked about yet is capacity building. We haven't talked about it so much. Do you feel you have the structures in place, the systems in place fully to make this work, or are there areas where you believe are more focused on training staff who have the skills that are needed to do this? I just throw those into the mix. But for you, what is the key ingredient if you're going to make all this work really effectively?
Yes, I'd like to share some experience on the very successful case in implementing the small-scale environmental management in Korea. There was a very hot issue in the semi-closed bay that is suffering from so long-standing the lead tide and then hypoxia. So to deal with these issues at the regional level, so at the time we need to verify the benefit by implementing new mechanism systems. So if all stakeholders recognize the benefit by implementing this new legal and institutional mechanism, they can accept implementation of the new legal mechanism. We start from the verification of how much benefit will bring your society by introduction of a new mechanism. So it took 2 years to proceed them to the step forward on this new legal mechanism. After then, next step is to verify. So next time is to clarify the cause and effect. Which sources is the main? Which one is his main problem? And then if we deal with this problem, how much benefit will bring to us? That is the relation between the problem and the effect of the problem resolution. Yeah, that is the.
But you took your time to get that right before you moved on. It was crucial to spend that 2 years. working on that first.
Yeah, just only the adoption of new legal mechanism. And after that, so there are so many scientific activities has been done to implement detailed the action plans.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And then so the other one is the key element for the successful implementation of a new mechanism. That is very specification of the target, what the goals and objective. Many people can agree on the vision, something like the very abstract. But if we going down, they are completely among the stakeholders on these very specified goals and the targets. Okay. Targets, goals, and then translate into the very quantified manners.
Thank you. For you, Alain, the key ingredients for success, the key issues, foundations you need to build if you are to build on the 2 years you've already done to really accelerate progress in this area?
I think for us, everything evolves around the political commitment of the country itself at the highest level, but also commitment across sectors. For example, for small islands, we are limited by our resources. Like you've rightly said, human resources, financial resources. And this will be critical. To start the process, to implement the process is one thing, but then followed by the actual implementation of the plan. This is where it can make or break, all these years, so much effort you've invested into this effort. So if you start on a high, whereby you have, a high commitment by the highest level, by the president, vice president, but also parliamentarians, politicians, I think you can to some extent guarantee a future ahead. This is your starting point. But also, most importantly also, is, like I've mentioned at the very beginning, so that people understand the process from start to finish. For example, for Seychelles, our end date will be 2020. We have 3 zones that we're developing. So people need to understand that from 16 to 2020, there will be a process. Eventually, that will lead to the whole plan being implemented. So we need to get everybody on board from the very start. And people need to understand also the demands and expectation of the process. Like I've said, for us in government, it's straightforward because we know our priority for the next 5 years will be the MSP on the marine side. Same will have to be for the private sector. They will have to understand, what's coming, so that they can plan and predict in terms of usage of resources and so on, the implications to the development.
We're going to come back on how to make that engagement work in our next panel. A very quick one to you, Leo, before I go out into our audience, and it is about cross-border cooperation. Because so far you've been talking about your internal challenge and sometimes challenges between ministries and so on. But when it comes to cross-border cooperation, transboundary, call it what you will, and the Commissioner described it as challenging but rewarding. How much have you worked with neighbours, and how challenging has it been, and how rewarding has it been, if I can put it that way? Quick ones, if you would, so we can get out to the room.
Yes. Now, when we drafted our plan in 2015, I visited all the North Sea countries. And I went there and explained the plan, and they said what they were doing. And in the end, we understood each other. And I think only Belgium, they made a comment on our plan, and for the rest, it was fine. So not so much exchange yet, but also not so much conflicts. There were some conflicts with a border issue, but that was solved. But now things have changing because of this political declaration we have on renewable energy. I'm the chair of the North Sea countries to try to see what we would develop on wind energy after 2023. And now suddenly it appears very clearly that we need further cooperation if this will be working out. And that is on interconnections, on building together, on planning, on SEA, strategic environmental assessment, because we share the same ecosystem. So that's quite a challenge. But indeed, because of all these investments in time and exchanging, we know each other. We can call each other, and we have a network of people. We meet en marge of the European expert meetings on MSP, and then we discuss. We are developing project proposals together, and that's, I think, very important.
It is building. Steve, Charles said, and he gave the example of the USA there in his slide about not that much transboundary cooperation. Are you working a lot with neighbours, with other countries, or for the moment is this a fairly internal process?
It's a fairly internal process, although we do have some neighbors to the north in Alaska, but the ones that we work with are First Nations.
Okay.
Not so much with the states themselves, but I would say that within the area that we plan, and because we have 4 planning units, and because we have 17 First Nations in the area, each of those nations is almost like a country unto itself.
So when the EU, for example, has its requirement in the MSP directive, you must cooperate because we need coherent, concerted, coordinated approaches. Effectively, you're in the same situation. You have to do it.
We would like to say that, but I think it's more a bit of coercion.
Sure. Any other comments to that before I go out to the room? Yeah, please, Alain.
Well, in reference to Seychelles, we're working together with Mauritius we have an extended continental shelf that extends to both territories. So on that level, we're working together with Mauritius because it's a joint commission. At the regional level, under the regional seas, obviously we fall under the Nairobi Convention, and one of the target areas and focus areas of the convention now is to promote the implementation of MSP. Within its countries. And we've started discussing, exchanging knowledge, experiences already within the Nairobi Convention. There's also, for example, discussion between the regional seas and Fisheries Commission, the Indian Ocean Fisheries Commission, to try and bridge the gap between. It's only beginning in our region, but it's working.
One question for the next couple of days perhaps will be what sort of support is needed to help build those processes. But Anya, you wanted to come in.
I just want to say for our region, we have that support already through the Benguela Current Convention. We have a regional MSP working group. Even though we haven't implemented MSP, we share experiences. Most of the working group members are actually sitting in this room. We had a meeting the last 2 weeks. So I think their collaboration on a technical level is definitely very good, and we have a convention overlooking that for the 3 countries.
Did either of you want to add anything? Yes, you go.
Yes, we're in Korea, and we have neighboring countries there, including the China and North Korea, and so it's Japan. But there are some conflict, so the boundary demarcation, and also some military the conflict, especially between the 2 Koreas. But this are now so even though we have some problem in enhancing cooperation at regional level, but we have the large marine ecosystem the project, and then so we have regional environmental mechanism, and then I think that EPSA or any other initiatives to protect our common resources, it might be a good trigger to drive our regional transboundary cooperation. And I think that, so I would like to share some relation between the GDP and conflict level. So if through the cooperation, if we can reduce those conflict level, I think that so our blue GDP will be increased. Okay.
Thank you very much. Wei, short one if you would, so I can go out to the room. Thank you.
For China, the cross-province or cross-country is not a problem in China to make MSP, because we have a system of marine functional rowing, national, provincial, and municipal. So all the provincial marine functional rowing must be reviewed by the state oceanic administration. So it's not a problem.
It is built in. The structure is there to do it.
For the country boundary, it's very complex. We think we can build a mechanism to move forward.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to come out to the room to see if there are any questions to what you are all hearing now. Does anybody, and can I ask you please to be very brief because we don't have very much time. Could you press your button in front of you. That's the one. And please introduce yourself, sir.
Bonjour à tous, je suis Blivi Adoté Blim, professeur d'université. Je fus vice-président de la COI. Et dans la géographie et la cartographie MSP présentée par les uns et les autres, et ceci dans la couverture de la commission océanographique intergouvernementale, puisque nous sommes en groupe 1, groupe 2, groupe 3, 4 et 5. Le groupe 5 me semble être pas lésé, mais pas connu en termes de MSP. Nous avons dans nos régions ce que nous appelons l'utilisation rationnelle de l'espace maritime. Si vous prenez le cas du Togo, d'où je viens, cette utilisation est bien marquée par des dispositions qui sont tenues par la Marine nationale, qui contrôle l'espace en des parcs marins. Et ensuite, nous avons le plan gazoduc. Alors, ce que nous voulons savoir, et je suis très heureux puisque j'ai rencontré M. Machado, c'est cette ouverture de l'assurance de l'Union européenne au monde en matière de MSP. Et nous souhaiterions que l'Union européenne tourne vers nous dans la zone IOCA, Africa, pour pouvoir développer. Alors, ce que je n'ai pas entendu...
Très brièvement, s'il vous plaît.
Très brièvement, quel est l'effet des nouvelles menaces sur le MSP?
Okay. Merci
Quel
beaucoup.
est l'état de l'extension du plateau continental dans la gestion de MSP? Alors, en matière...
On ne peut pas reprendre à tout ça dans des courtes sessions, mais on va...
Merci beaucoup.
Bon, mais on va... This question of new threats as well leads me to a broader question about how we've talked about an adaptive MSP. How do you ensure that it can constantly respond to those new threats? Any others before I come back on that question to our panel? Yes, please, right at the back there, please. And please introduce yourself, sir.
My name is Zachary Maritim from Kenya, working for WWF. Thank you very much, Charles, for setting the environment so well. When you spoke, I think what I got was there is the issue of advisory plans and the regulatory plans. I believe the first one is just the making of the plans, and then the next one is the implementation and enforcement. I don't know which one is the chicken and which one is the egg, especially vis-a-vis what Leo spoke about. When you look at the Netherlands, it looks like they are doing the plans and implementing them, therefore making the plans especially explicit and doing the regulations at the same time. Unlike Belgium, which took them 9 years, I know Belgium is not represented at the panel, but they must be in the House.
So which way round should it go?
Which way round should it go?
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Any others before we come back? Yes, one more and then we'll come back to the panel. Thank you, sir.
Thank you everybody from this panel. I'm Reza Badal from Mauritius, and I'd like to say hello to my friend Seychelles from the plateau. My question is with regards to integrated coastal zone management, and one of the panelists, in fact, talked about whether this is kind of directly related to MSP. So is there already kind of a conflict there in terms of management? And if there is, how do we tackle it?
Thank you very much indeed. Okay. Let's come back. Please, panel, don't feel, in the interest of time, you need to pick up on all these points, but what is most relevant to you? Can anybody... Leo, there was one particularly directed at you, so perhaps you could take that one.
The last one I couldn't hear. What was the question?
Come back to him and get it to repeat itself. Can you just...
Yeah. It's about the integrated coastal zone management.
Whether there is a...
It's already a management plan, but the difference, of course, would be there's a kind of a lack of map. Is MSP conflicting already with integrated coastal zone management? If there is any conflict between those two types of management, how do we have recourse to resolve them?
Thank you very much. Leo first.
Okay. Yeah, on the first one was on adaptive management. I think that's a crucial element of implementation MSP. We do two things. One is that every 6 years we adopt the plan anyhow. That's in the legislation. And if there is a big change in the meantime, we might even make a small change to the plan officially. Like we have elections today, we never know what will happen tomorrow, so there might be a new initiative from a new government, and then we have to adapt to the plan. But the other element is that you cannot react on everything which is happening. So we try to keep the planning on a higher abstract level and make more management arrangement on a detailed level in a nested plan, which is then has its own power to change and adapt and to talk to stakeholders. So the main plan, which you involve all the stakeholders and everybody on a national authority level. In the Netherlands, it's only national authority dealing with spatial planning at sea. You keep it on a higher level. So that's on that one. On integrated coastal management, I know that in the Mediterranean, it's two of a kind. In fact, the coastal zone, especially the first 12 miles in the Mediterranean, is coastal management and is MSP, and in most countries they don't have an EEZ anyhow. So that's somehow similar. What we struggle in the North Sea is much more, at least in the Netherlands, which is different from Germany and in what Charles showed, where the lender and the local authorities have a more important role to play, and in Belgium also, and in Sweden, but the Netherlands not. So we have this discussion on the interaction between the land and the sea. And that is not always simple, because officially the sea is a mandate of the national authorities, while some local authorities suffer or benefit from the spatial plan. So we are still working, improving how this interaction between the coastal zone and the sea area can work together.
Anybody else want to pick up on questions from the floor? Steve.
Yeah, just on the adaptive piece, I think it's really crucial, and I think similar to Leo, we have a live document type of a situation where we are doing renewal on the plans every 5 years. We do small incremental changes throughout time, but leave the big ones for the sort of 5-year cycle. I think also it comes back to some of the key points that Charles made earlier about monitoring and evaluation, transparency, maintaining stakeholders in the process, in the implementation process. So, in our process, we are working hard now as in the implementation process, to bring stakeholders back into the processes where we are taking on specific projects and engaging them on, so they feel ownership over the process and continue to engage, and they keep us honest.
And that sort of answers the question or the point made by the gentleman from Kenya. There isn't a chicken and an egg, it is a continual loop of working on the plan, implementing the plan, but also revising the plan by differentiating between those different levels. Any other points to the questions on the floor? Because there's a couple of other things I would like to ask the rest of you, if not. I just want to get an impression from those of you at the beginning of this process. When you listen to the Dutch experience, the Canadian experience, the Chinese experience, those who've really been doing this for a long time, do you feel what you're hearing and what you know about them, you can take what they have done and apply it to your own situation? Or do you feel there are very unique characteristics that mean you will have to come up with your own solutions? To what extent can we, as we hear best practices over the next 2.5 days, to what extent can we take them and apply them elsewhere, or simply learn the lessons and then come up with our own solutions? Anja, what is your feeling?
We definitely can learn some lessons and take some advice, but I personally believe it's very much a learn by doing thing, especially as in Namibia we don't have any legislation for MSP. But some people say don't start until the legislation is in place. We take a different approach. We jump in and hope that as a parallel process the legislation is created. So when we've got the plan, we have a framework for it to fall in.
And for those who argue don't start till you've got the legislation, why do you think that's the wrong way round? Why have you just decided, no, we're going to go ahead and hope they catch up?
Because a law that's passed will not necessarily be implemented anyway. It's, and when you only start, when the law is passed, you start from zero, scratch. it takes another 10 years.
So in a sense, Alain, the trick is to focus on what you can do with what you've got,
and push the process as well.
What else? Would you echo that? And how much do you feel you can learn from these guys?
No, I think I agree with Anya 100%. And also an advice to my friend from Mauritius. I know soon they'll be starting the process. Is to learn as you go, but also implement as you go. I mean, something that we've learned in Seychelles together with our partner TNC and working with stakeholders is that it shouldn't be a stringent and closed process. It's an adaptive process, and people should take the process of going about the Marine Spatial Plan with an open mind and the willingness to work together. I think once you've established that, one thing that has come out very strongly is this participatory approach, obviously, which is key. As usual, it will be led by government, but it's very important that stakeholders, down to the grassroots level, needs to understand that it's their plan also, it's their process also. If this doesn't transpire from the very start, then you're bound to fail. You can have the highest political commitment, but if it's not added and coupled with this openness and honesty also in the process, then you won't get as much input and information as you wish.
Thank you. And that question of ownership of the process by the stakeholders is something I hope we'll come back to. I just want to come, Leo, down Wei, from your perspective and picking up on this question about new threats and this needing to be flexible and to adapt. How have you coped with that in China? There's a microphone. Here's one there.
Every 10 years, we have new generation marine function ruling. At the same time, based on the sea area management law and the regulation of marine function ruling, every 2 years, the local government can submit a report to state oceanic administration to revise MFZ. Before they submit the report, they must evaluate the implementation of the MSP.
So you need to build
a method of adaptive management.
Build that constant revision process. Young Ho, quick one on this, and then I need to try, we are almost out of time. I want to try and draw some conclusions.
Yes, this is a threat in the future is upgrading our MSP planning. So I think that's so. I think the first one is the depletion of available resources and spaces, just like my head. My hair now escaped from my head. That means it's by hard work and then so high density development. I think that there might be a cause of depletion of our resources. Depletion of resources it means it's the higher probability to create a conflict, and that is our spatial planning regime make more complex. Okay.
Thank you very much. Before we draw some conclusions, Leo, you wanted to jump in just a moment ago. Quick one if you would.
On learning from each other. I worked on coastal management for 20 years in many parts in the world. Each country is different and has different culture and setting, and also on MSP, even Europe, I don't see two countries doing the same and having the same process. That's why I think also this MSP is a guide, not a guideline, and there are some principles there which you could adopt, and those principles, I think they are more generic, but how you fill it in and how you use them, that depends very much on the specific of a country, and how we can assist is when we have MSP meetings on European level, we try to just ask questions to each other. and not answers.
So that approach that the IOC took with its step-by-step guidelines, saying, okay, this is what you need to think about first, this is what you need to think about second, and here are some of the issues you need. That's the right way. That's asking the right questions. It's not trying to give common answers all the time. Yeah. Okay, we are almost out of time, and I want to try and draw some conclusions from our session, because at the beginning, the Commissioner had a plea for not just learning and exchanging, but also shaping the future. So when it comes to shaping that future, and if we are to accelerate progress, to build on the progress in the countries that have been doing it for a long time, and to help those who are at the starting point to really move fast on this issue, and we've heard how important that is, what for each of you, in half a minute or so, is the most important priority for action now? Over the next decade, what do you think we need to do first way to build on Progress Day? Go down the line, each of you, one priority for the future.
I think build a platform for MSP community is very important. We can share the experience and the lessons and study the methods of MSP together and move forward.
So we already have an EU platform. This idea of an international platform for you, very central. Young Ho.
Yes, I think there is reliable and very concrete data on relation between marine spatial planning and marine GDP or blue GDP, blue growth.
Thank you. Alain.
I think I agree with my colleague from China. We need to come together. Like it was shown in the keynote address, the curve will be going up. So, with this curve, there's a huge amount of experience and knowledge that has come up over the years, all the way from Australia with the Great Barrier Reef, all the way to China and everybody now. So I think for us, with the conference, this is excellent again. We need to share information and knowledge from what we've got from our own experiences. Obviously, something that's important to note is that each country will have to adapt its process and framework according to its own perspective. But however, there are some key guiding principles that countries have learned over the years. That I think now that the time is right now to start sharing and exchanging information and making this readily accessible. We've talked about data in the past to kickstart the process, but now I think with countries that has implemented all over the years and from our own experience, I think there's this wealth of information and data out there is waiting to be shared
so
and
sometimes
and
we don't, to use a very English expression, we don't need to reinvent the wheel.
Exactly.
Let's see what's there and share it, and then develop your tailor-made solution from that. For you, Anya, the key priority for the future?
For Namibia, I think the key priority is to make sure that MSP is embedded in an institution, in an impartial institution, because we're still at a project phase. So only then we can also ensure sustainability, and then, of course, the same people can share experience and gain capacity.
And is there anything in terms of priorities for the international community to help you in that process? Is there anything you would particularly like to see?
I think we've got a lot of help. We just have to bring the message to our managers. We are busy with the process.
Yeah, and again, we come back to that understanding, getting the message across. Steve, for you, the priority for the future?
I think one of the key priorities that we have is again, the institutionalization of the process to develop the capacity. One of the problems that I didn't mention earlier, the challenges that we have, is having people in the communities who can actually do the work. It's a short bench who can actually get out there and engage people in a meaningful way. So I think that's, having those people, having that institutionalized process, having the champions, whether it's in stakeholders, whether it's in government or within communities, to move the process forward. And I think from an international level, building or supporting those champions, providing information, sharing information, education, I think is a big part of it.
So MSP ambassadors for the future. Leo, you have the last word.
Oh, that's too much pressure. No, I heard it a few times already, learning by doing. So start, but keep it simple. In the first round, do experience, don't make it too complicated, do only the planning, the things you need to do, you will come across all the things you will have to face and find solutions. And the second round, and even the third round, is much easier then.
And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, will you join me in thanking our panel very much indeed for a very stimulating start to our talks. We're going to come back. We're going to take a coffee break now for 30 minutes. Coffee is served outside. Please do come back sharp at 5 o'clock, because I think the thing we've heard most about from this panel is the importance of that stakeholder engagement, that ownership, that buy-in, developing visions together. We want to delve into that in our next panel and discuss how do you effectively engage, which stakeholders, when do you engage, how do you engage. So that's what we'll discuss with our next panel. Enjoy the coffee, and I'll see you back here in 30 minutes. Thank you very much.